All right, so welcome back, everybody. So for this video, I'm going to explain how all of these brown, when activated bird powers work. We'll try to see if we can cover all of them in this video, hopefully. Okay, so let's get started. We have quite a few to go over. Let's try to decrease the amount of cards in my hand to start with. Okay, so first of all, we have each player may roll any one dice and gain that food from the supply. So when you activate this power, each player may roll any one of the dice, and then whatever they rolled, they gain that food from the supply. So very interactive, very random of what potential food you and your opponents get. Okay? With this one, for each bird in your forest with an egg on it, roll any one dice, choose one type of food you rolled, and gain one of that food from the supply. So if you have, like, for instance, 3 eggs in your forest, you get to roll 3 dice, okay? Then you choose one type of the food that you rolled, and you gain that food type. So whatever the 3 you rolled, you can choose one of the 3, basically, food type, and you get a food. Cool. Could be anything, once again, random, based on the luck of the roll of what food you potentially could get. But, you know, every time it's activated, you could activate it. So anytime you do one of these actions, or for this case, whenever you take the action gain food, this could be activated, obviously. All right. Well, this one is similar to the last one. For each bird in your savanna, not the forest, but savanna, that one, with eggs on it, you may roll any one dice, and then you get to choose one type of food you rolled and gain one of that from the supply. So it's exactly the same, basically. And the only difference is this one's in the forest, this one's in the savanna. That's the only difference between those two cards. So let's move on. So that this one you can gain 1 invertebrate, 1 seed, or 1 berry from the supply. Very simple, very easy to understand. Let's move on. Okay, all players gain 1 seed from the supply. You also get to lay an egg. So all players, including yourself, get a seed from the supply, and you get 1 egg. Cool. Gain 1 invertebrate or berry from the bird feeder if there is one. So every time you activate this, if there's an invertebrate or a berry, you can gain one of them, and one of those foods from the bird feeder. Cool. This one's the exact same ability. The only difference is it's invertebrate and seed. So it's the exact same one, but it's either an invertebrate or seed instead of an invertebrate or berry. If you have gained an invertebrate from the bird feeder on this turn, because, you know, this is sitting in your forest when it gets activated, that meant you gained food this turn. And if you gained food from the bird feeder that was an invertebrate, you also gain 1 berry from the supply as well. So that's cool. So that means if you have this in your forest, you might want to gain an invertebrate, probably. All right. With this one, when activated, gain 1 invertebrate or rodent from the bird feeder if there is one. You may cache it on this bird. So it's very similar to some of the other ones. You're gaining food from the bird feeder if they're available, if it's this particular types, but you could also potentially cache it on this bird, on this green magpie, for extra points at the end of the game. Cool. With this one, you can cache an invertebrate, seed, or berry from the bird feeder on this bird if there is one. So you're not gaining food with this one, you're only caching food, these potential foods, if they're in the bird feeder. Cool. All players may cache 1 invertebrate from their personal supply on a bird in their savanna. So they can cache an invertebrate on a bird they have in their savanna. All players can do this, but it has to be from their personal supply. So, but it's a choice. You don't have to. It's a may cache. Cool. Well, this is simple. All players lay 1 egg. Cool. Well, this one's very similar. all players lay 1 egg, you get to lay an additional egg. So hey, you get to lay 2 eggs, your opponents get to lay 1 egg. Lay 1 egg on another bird in this column. So if you have another bird in this column, so if this bird was here in this column, you can lay an egg on another bird in this column with this ability. Cool. Count the number of eggs. So count the eggs on all of your birds. If the total is fewer than 6 eggs, you get to lay 1 egg on this red jungle fowl. So it rewards you for not having a lot of eggs by getting to lay eggs. Cool. If you have at least 1 berry in your supply, lay 1 egg on this bird. So hey, if you've got a berry in your supply, you get to lay an egg on this bird. Cool. Give 1 card from your hand to another player, and if you do, you get to lay 2 eggs on this bird. But remember, its limit is 2 eggs, so you might only get to do this 1 time. But if you're going to be spending eggs for egg cost, you might want to do it from this bird, so that way you can do this more often, right? That just makes more sense for the Tragopan here. Cool. All right, the crested lark. Discard 1 seed. If you do, lay 1 egg on this bird. So if you have a seed in your supply, you can discard it, and if you do, you get to lay an egg on this bird. All players may discard 1 seed from their supply to lay 1 egg. So all players now can do it with this bird. It's not just you. All players can discard a seed from their supply to lay an egg, lay 1 egg on a bird they have. Cool. Discard 1 card from your hand, and if you do, lay 1 egg on this bird. Okay, cool. So discard a card, you get to lay an egg. Cool. All right. Discard any number of cards from the tray, then refill it. If at least one of the discarded birds is a savanna bird, you get to lay 1 egg on this bird. So obviously, there's 3 birds in the tray, and most likely, when you activate this, most likely you'll notice if one of them is a savanna bird. And then if it is, and that's the one you discard, you get to lay an egg on this bird. Now, you could potentially do this just to get rid of some of the birds. Maybe you don't like the birds in the tray. This is a good way of discarding them to draw more cards for later. So that way when later on when you want to draw bird cards, okay, you could potentially draw a good card from the bird tray because, hey, this lets you discard bird cards from the tray that you may not like. So, interesting ability. Might reward you, depending on what is discarded. The red wattled lapwing. Discard any number of cards from the tray, then refill it. And then if at least one of the discarded birds is a hunting or fishing bird, you lay 1 egg on this bird. So very similar to the last one, except it's hunting and fishing birds instead of savanna birds. All right, discard 1 egg. If you do, gain 1 invertebrate from the supply. So that's interesting. Discard an egg, and if you do, you get an invertebrate from the supply. Cool. Each player may discard 1 egg to draw 1 card from the deck. That's interesting. So everyone can do it. They may discard an egg to draw a card from the deck. So that's cool for the Saurus crane. Cool. We have these at our zoo. Cool birds. All right. The little egret. Draw 1 card from the deck and add it to your hand. Okay, that's interesting. All other players draw 1 card from the deck and get to keep it if that bird can live in the wetlands. So this is interesting. You draw a card from the deck. You always get to draw a card from the deck with this bird and add it to your hand. Your opponents, they get to draw a card, but only if it lives in the wetlands. So if it doesn't live in the wetlands, they have to discard it. So it could potentially help out your opponents, but it may not help out every one of your opponents. That every time you activate this, it may not always help out your opponents. It might help out player 2, but it may not help out player 3 because he drawed a bird that can't live in wetlands. So that's a very interesting interactive ability that may or may not be useful to your opponents, but it's still going to help you regardless. Okay, so this one is draw 1 bird card for each bird in your wetlands with an egg on it. You get to keep 1 and discard the rest. So it increases your chances of getting a bunch of birds and getting to choose from a bunch to keep, but you still have to discard the rest regardless. But you could at least potentially draw 1 card regardless, assuming you have, obviously a bird that has an egg on it in the wetlands. Cool, cool. All right, so this one's very similar to the last one. For each bird in this column with an egg on it, you draw one card, you get to keep one, and discard the rest. So at most, for each bird in this column with an egg on it, at most you'd be drawing 3 cards, because it's each bird in a column. So if it was here, and there was a bird here and here, and they each had an egg on it, and this one did too, you'd have draw 3 cards, you get to keep one, you discard the rest. Cool, cool. All right, draw 1 card from the deck and add it to your hand. Okay, cool, cool. All other players draw 1 card from the deck and add it to their hand if the bird has a invertebrate or seed in its food cost. So that's interesting. So it's kind of similar to some of the other ones that we just went over, except it's a food cost. So if the bird is an invertebrate, has an invertebrate or a seed in its food cost, they would get to keep the card. That's interesting, but regardless, you get to draw a card regardless. So cool. Interactive, but good for you, and maybe good for your opponents. All right, this one is you can give 1 card from your hand to another player, and if you do, you get to draw 2 cards. So hey, you don't like what card you have in your hand, you can give it to another player, and in exchange, you're getting 2 cards. What a deal. Very cool. Okay, with this one, you can draw the card that's in the middle slot of the bird tray. There's always 3 cards in the bird tray. 3 cards. It's the one in the middle of the 3 cards that you get to keep. Cool, cool. All right. If this bird has no birds to the right of it, you may move it. Okay, these next 2, well, these 3 are very unique, but these next 2 are very similar and unique. Okay, so if this bird has no other birds to the right of it, you may move it. So if this bird was here, and there were no birds here, but let's just say for the point of argument that, let's see here, let's put it here. So we have, because I have a bird here that can go in the wetlands, and I have a bird here that can go in the wetlands, okay? So if this bird was here, and these birds were to the left of it, but it had no birds to the right of it, then you could move this, okay? But here's the interesting thing. Now, there are some birds from the base game of Wingspan that would let you move a bird to a different row if there was no birds here. But this one isn't the same as that, as those. This one is, you get to move it to another player mat, okay? But to the player on your left, okay? So you get to basically give this bird to your opponent on the left, and it goes into their aviary, and you get to choose where you're going to put it in their aviary. Now, it's a bird that gives you 0 points at the end of the game, so it's taking up space in their aviary. So it's potentially an attack card because it's potentially causing, messing up their game. You're potentially messing them up, but not for long, because if your opponent has this, and they do a particular action and then activate this, they could potentially give it right back to you or give it to another player. But the reason why you would want to give it to another player in the first place is it's going to let you draw 3 cards if you move this to your opponent. You get to draw 3 cards. So that's a benefit. It's a good benefit. And your opponent may not like it at first, but most likely they will get to activate it again, giving it to another player to draw 3 cards, or back to you. And then, of course, you could potentially activate it again if it comes back to you, assuming you get to activate it before the end of the game. But still, that's an awesome, interesting card, and with a very strong benefit to anybody who gets it. And the next bird is basically exactly the same as this bird here, except you give it to the player to your right instead of your left. So these 2 birds, the spotted dove and the blue rock thrush, have the same ability, except it's contingent on left or right, depending on what bird it is. So this one goes to the left, this one goes to the right. Still, that's very fascinating. Very interesting birds, nonetheless. Okay, and then this one is you get to copy the when activated brown power of a bird in the savanna of a player to your left. Now remember, there was a white ability with the same unique power as this that we talked about in the other video. And there was a blue one as well. So this isn't new. So this isn't the only one with a similar ability to this. This is just the only one that activates brown powers and that is brown. Well, the blue one activated brown powers, I believe. But this one activates brown powers and is brown. So this potentially could be activated quite a bit because it's when activated. So this is a very interesting ability. And when I first explained this one that had a similar ability that was in the white section. So let me find it. Let's see here. If I can find it real fast. This white bird. Oh. Here we go. See? Same bird. Okay? This bird, we talked about this bird already. Okay, but this one is white. It gets to copy a when played white ability of your neighbor's birds. This one, it's to your left only, but it's only birds in their savanna to the left, and it's a brown power, not a white power like this one. And this one is also similar to that because this one was, it's your powers. It's not your opponent's. These are your opponent's powers, bird powers that they might have. This one is what you have, and it's all of them of the hunting and fishing. So these three birds are very unique, but obviously this one is blue and activates brown hunting and fishing abilities. This one activates white abilities of an opponent to either your right or your left. And this one activates only birds in your opponent's left aviary that's in the savanna, and that's brown. So that's interesting. But so anyways, that's really cool. So these three birds are unique, but obviously have similar abilities for sure. Okay, so we still have more brown abilities to go over. So let's see if we can finish this up. Okay. All right, so these are mostly flocking bird powers here. And then there's still some hunting and fishing stuff. All right, so with this one, you can cache one food from your supply on any bird. And if you do, you may tuck one card from your hand behind this bird. So you can cache one food from your supply on any bird with this ability. And if you do that, you also get to tuck a card from your hand behind this bird, if you want. That's an interesting ability. It's still all optional. This one is very similar to the last one, but there is still a bit of a variation. You can cache one food from your supply on this bird. So this one, it's any bird that you have. This one, it's on this bird. And then you can tuck one card from your hand behind this bird. And then if you do either, you can tuck another card from the deck behind this bird. So you're given two choices that you could potentially do one of the two, or you could do both. I mean, you can't do both, but you could do one of the two. You can either cache a food from your supply on this bird, or you can tuck one card from your hand behind this bird, this rook. And then if you do one of those two, you still get to tuck a card from the deck behind this bird. So that's cool. That's very interesting. So that's the rook. Okay, this one's very interesting too, the great hornbill. All players may tuck a card from their hand under a bird in their forest and or cache one berry from their supply on a bird in their forest. So this is something all players can do. They may do this. They may, tuck a card from their hand under a bird that they have in the forest, hence up here, or. So they can do both, or they can do one of the two, and then they can cache one berry from their supply on a bird in their forest. So that's, contingent they have a berry in their supply in the first place. But it's cool that everybody can do this. All players can do both or one of the options, or none. Purely optional. Very interactive, very cool ability for sure. Definitely one of my favorite birds in this expansion, both bird and power. Definitely one of my favorites. Cool. All right, moving on. Okay, so gain one seed from the supply or tuck one bird card from the deck behind this bird. Well, that's cool. So you can gain a seed from the supply, or you can tuck a card from the deck behind this bird. So that's a really good ability. Both of them are good, but you get to choose. You can tuck one card from your hand behind this bird. And then if you do that, you can gain an invertebrate, a seed, or a berry from the bird feeder. And I guess they forgot to say it, if there is one, assuming that one of those three foods are in the bird feeder. That's assuming that's the case. But still, cool. You get to, if that's only, of course, if you tuck a card from your hand, of course. So that's how that works. You can tuck up to 3 cards from your hand behind this bird. And if you tuck at least one of the 3, you can gain an invertebrate from the supply. Cool, cool. Rosie Sterling. This one is very similar to the last one, except instead of gaining an invertebrate from the supply, you can lay 1 egg on this bird instead. That's what you'll do instead of food. Cool, cool. This one you can tuck up to 3 cards from your hand behind this bird with no additional benefit, but you can do up to 3 if you want. That means you can do 0, meaning you don't have to do the ability anyway, but still, up to 3. Cool, cool. If there is at least 1 bird on the tray that has invertebrate in its food cost, you can tuck one of them behind this bird. So that's a really good ability. The green bee eater. Cool, cool. Another one of my favorite birds for sure. Okay, and then if you laid an egg on this bird this turn, you can tuck 1 card from the deck behind this bird. So that's cool. So this is going to be here laying eggs, right? Taking the lay eggs action. This bird's going to be sitting in this area. And if you laid an egg on this bird, the turn that you took this action, then you could activate this to tuck a card from the deck behind this bird for an additional point. That's cool. Very cool. Okay, we still have a few more birds here. Not many to go over. The hunting and fishing birds are next, and then we'll be all done. So this one's definitely going to be a little longer than the last 2 videos for sure, but let's just do it. Okay, so this one is up to 3 times. You can draw 1 card from the deck. Now, I got to say that this card, the next couple of cards, it's a gamble. It's a push your luck ability, okay? So up to 3 times, you draw 1 card from the deck. When you stop, if the bird's total wingspan is less than 110 centimeters, you tuck them behind this bird. If not, you discard the bird cards. So let's kind of explain this a little bit. Let's say these are the cards. This is the deck of cards here. Let's just say that this is the deck of cards. In fact, it's more believable if there's more cards in the deck, right? So let's say this is the deck of cards, and the first card we draw has 75 centimeters. Wow, that's a lot of centimeters, okay? That's still less than 110 centimeters, okay? So this is going to require you to do some math. So you might need a calculator for this ability to make it easier. But so you can choose to tuck this 1 card behind the Eurasian eagle owl, and that's the end of it. Or you can choose to keep going, trying to push your luck. So let's draw another card. This one has 29 centimeters. So that's a little over 100 centimeters, but it's still under 110 centimeters. So now you could potentially just end it there and tuck these 2 cards behind the Eurasian eagle owl. Okay, so every time you activate this ability, that's what you potentially could do. Now, if you were to go again and you went over the 110 centimeters, then you would have to discard all the birds that you drew, and you wouldn't be tucking any birds. So let's do that. Let's see. Oh, the next one has 36 centimeters. Well, it goes over 110 centimeters. So now these 3 birds get discarded, and you get nothing at all. So that's how that's going to work. Push your luck, for sure, okay? But you could potentially tuck a few birds every time you do this, or even just 1. Of course, if you're unlucky and you get a bird that's already over 110 centimeters, because this one's 174 centimeters, then you get nothing at all anyways. But that's still an interesting ability, push your luck. This one is exactly the same as well. So the Eurasian marsh harrier has the exact same ability as this Eurasian eagle owl. Exact same one, it's exact same amount of centimeters and everything. And you're tucking birds behind this bird as well. So same ability, but still push your luck, obviously. Okay, now we still have some more push your luck, but with this is different. So the Sri Lanka frogmouth, you can roll any one die. If you roll a invertebrate, you cash one invertebrate from the supply on this bird. All players may discard one card from their hand to gain one seed from the supply. So this isn't push your luck. There are some coming up that are still push your luck, though. So you can roll any one dice from the bird feeder. If you roll an invertebrate, you get to cash one invertebrate on the frogmouth from the supply on this bird. That's cool. And then all players may discard one card from their hand to gain one one invertebrate from the supply. So while it's a gamble for you, sort of whether you get to cash an invertebrate on the supply, your opponents can discard a card to gain a food from the supply. So they're doing something else. But it's all players. So while you could potentially put an invertebrate on this bird, you could also discard a card as well and gain an invertebrate from the supply. So you could do both, or, you could do both, which is cool. Cool ability. Okay, so this one's similar. You can roll any 2 dice. If you roll at least 1 fish, you cash 1 fish from the supply on this bird. Well, cool. And then all players may discard one card from their hand to gain 1 fish from the supply. So it's very similar to the last one. The only difference is it's fish, and you're rolling 2 dice instead of 1 dice. And obviously everything else is the same. Everything else is very similar. Obviously, you're discarding 1 card to gain 1 fish from the supply, but all players can do that. So very similar abilities there for sure. Okay. This one is you can choose any 1 dice and roll it once. This one's interesting. So you can roll any 1 dice and roll it once for each of your wetland birds. If you roll at least 1 fish, you can gain 1 from the supply. You may cash it on this bird. So it's contingent on what birds you have in your wetlands. If you have a few birds in your wetlands, you can roll it once for each of your birds. So you can pick a dice, roll it once for each of the birds in your wetlands. So if you have 3 birds in your wetlands, you get to roll it 3 times. And then if you roll the fish at least 1 time out of the 3 times you roll it, meaning if you have 3 birds or more in your wetlands, or 2 birds or whatever, when you activate this, if you did, you get to gain 1 from the supply, and you also may cash it on the birds. So you could cash it if you want to, or you can just add it to your supply. So very interesting ability. With this one, you can roll any 3 dice. If you roll at least 1 rodent, you can cash 1 rodent on this bird. So that's cool. Rolling 3 dice for a potential possibility of rolling a rodent to cash on this bird. Cool. Okay, this is definitely push your luck. All right. Yeah, these are all pretty much push your luck, except for maybe one of them. With this one, you can choose any 1 dice and roll it up to 3 times. Each time, if you roll an invertebrate, fish, or rodent, you cash 1 here. If not, stop and return all food cached here this turn. So if the first time you roll the dice and it's not one of these 3 food types, that's it. You get nothing. Okay? 0. If the first time you roll the dice and it's an invertebrate, let's say, or one of these 3, you get to cash it on the bird. Now you run the risk, if you keep going, you run the risk of not rolling one of those 3 things, and then if you were to roll a seed or a berry instead, then everything that was cached here you'd also lose that you cached here this turn. Not from previous turns, but everything you cached here this turn would be lost. So it's a gamble. push your luck for sure. Now this other one has, this purple heron here has almost the exact same ability. The only difference is you can roll, you can choose to choose any 2 dice and roll them up to 3 times, and then each time if you roll at least 1 invertebrate or fish, you cache 1 here. And then if not, you have to stop and return all food cached here this turn. So very similar, except it's either a fish or an invertebrate, but you get to roll 2 dice instead of 1. So that's the major difference. This one also lets you roll 2 dice, just like with the purple heron. The purple heron. You can also roll 2 dice with the forest outlet, and you can roll up to 3 times, but it's invertebrate or rodent, and you cache 1 here. And then obviously if you roll something else, then you lose it. You lose everything that you roll, you cast to this turn. So very similar, obviously, to the last one. This one is very similar to that one as well, but you get to roll 3 dice instead of 2 dice. And then if at least one of them was a fish or a rodent, you get to cache 1 here. If not, you stop and return all food cached here. So once again, it's push your luck, but you get to roll 3 dice instead of 2. And then the last one here, the great cormorant. You may move 1 fish from this bird to your supply. Well, that's assuming you already have a fish on the card. The first time you activate this, you probably won't have a fish cached on this card. But then you can roll any 2 dice, and then if any are fish, you get to cache 1 on this bird from the supply. So the first time you may not have fish here, but the second time, if you're able to get a fish here, if the first time, if you're able to get a fish here, then that means the second time you play this, if there was a fish here, which might be the case, you get to put it into your supply, and then still maybe add more fish to this bird. So that's really interesting, very interesting indeed. So that's all of the birds. We have covered every single bird in this expansion. So if you guys like this video, don't forget to leave me a like, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.